we've recently had a guest talking about burnout and
Mhm.
uh, Hayden and her surname just flying out of my head. But Hayden's talked about burnout,
Yeah.
and obviously, burnout manifests for different people in different ways.
Yes.
So, just because we've recently spoken about burnout, how did you notice that
Mhm.
you obviously didn't wake up one
Yeah.
morning and go, ah, I've got burnout. Okay, what do I do?
Yeah.
How did you find that
So,
journey, that process, until you realized what it was? Sort of, yes, you were driven on cortisol and that
mhm.
lovely cocktail with adrenaline and everything else. But what were, looking back
Yeah.
now, what were sort of some of the symptoms that you now know was burnout? Just if we've got listeners who are a little
Mhm.
bit in that phase that you were, but don't
Yeah.
necessarily know that they've got it, because we don't always
Mhm.
know beforehand. It's when we look back, it's like, that's what it
Yeah.
was. So, what
Yeah.
were the symptoms for you that you now know
Mhm.
was you starting to really suffer with
Yeah.
burnout and starting to change your life, really?
Yeah. So I can tell you that I've been burned out 2.5 times already. So, and the first time I had no idea that it was burnout. The second time I was actually in on sick leave for 6 months. At that point, I knew that was burnout. And then the point five I always say was when I started my own solopreneurship, and I figured out, hey, these are exactly the symptoms. I'm going into burnout. I'm not going to do that, and I'm going to actually kind of like prevent myself from going into 2 3 months of complete non-working. Right. So for me, the um, so with I'm going to start with the first burnout. So with the first burnout, I actually didn't know it was there, and because it was in 2018, and I was a plant production director, I quit shortly afterwards. Was it almost didn't have that much symptoms, but I was just working all the time, and I was pushing myself hard because I was still under the influence, I would say, of my military training and all of that, like kind of like just toughen it out. And I cut all of my emotions, which was probably one of the things as well. And what was happening with me was more physical, in terms of my I almost couldn't move my neck. Like all of my background on in my neck was like legitimately swollen. It almost seemed like I kind of like hurt my head in a way that I just couldn't move. I was able just to move like this, right? And when I quit, it lasted kind of like a month and a half. Now, the second burnout, that was the worst one. Was It started really with brain fog. So both of them actually started also with brain fog that I couldn't think. But this one was so severe that the last day I went to work, I honestly didn't remember how I got there. I think I almost crashed with it, like in my car like once or twice. And then in 9 hours that I was at work, I was able to do around 30 minutes of work than I would normally have done when I wasn't burnt out. And that was like, that's it for me, right? I just can't do it. And the other symptoms were also, of course, I was working more, I was more irritated, and my relationships were kind of going bad, right? So not that much with my girlfriend, but still, I wasn't that accessible. I didn't want to hang out that much. I just wanted kind of like to sleep, right? And then, of course, when I went to sick leave, the first month was pretty much me sleeping most of the time and not even being able to wake up, right? Not wake up, just stand up from bed, pretty much, right? And so, actually, at that point, I started to really want to understand what was happening inside my brain. So one of the certifications I have is also a brain coaching certification. And kind of the way I understood that the last burnout almost happened was a really nice acronym that I've learned is the six elemental piece of a healthy brain, which I also say is, if it's not healthy, is also it goes into you go into burnout. And kind of like those elemental pieces are, L is for love or relationships. If you have positive ones, it's going to be amazing. If you have negative ones, it's actually going to physically affect you as well. And it's better to have no interactions, what I did in 2025, versus actually having negative ones. And this last burnout kind of started with my boss. where my boss changed and that person was abusive, and it was actually a reflection of my dad. And it's no coincidence that 2 months before I started with my therapy as well. So kind of like that was playing out. Then the next one is the M is movement. So we are still, our evolution is still in the Stone Age, and we need to move most of the time, right? We are sitting here and just talking for 6, 7, 8 hours is really bad for us. So we always want to move, and that kind of like also reflected that I was working so much. I didn't want to go even outside, even for a walk. And it was, again, it kind of like was just a cascading effect. And then N, which is kind of like novelty, is if you know anything about neuroplasticity, we need to read new things, like have new interactions and all of that stuff. And with that, if you don't do them, again, it starts a cascading effect. And I stopped doing that. I was learning Spanish at that time, but I didn't even have enough time for 2 hours a week, or at least I thought, to learn those. I was irritable and all of that, and it started like cascading again. And then the next N is kind of like nature. So if we live in apartments and flats and stuff like that, and if we don't go into nature, that's going to be even worse for us, because we're, again, used to living in the wild. We were hunter gatherers and all of that stuff, right? So now if I look in the left, I have a forest here. On my right, on the other side of the office, right, is a stream and everything else. So I can just always be in nature. And then the O, when we're talking about, is omega-3 and a healthy diet. We don't need to talk about healthy diet. There's 1,000 gurus there that are telling you about that. But omega-3 is pretty much the best fatty acid, and it's the building blocks of our brain, since our brain is like 76 to 72% of fats. So I pretty much always just use I have a pill just to pop it in like every day, because we don't eat enough. And then P is pauses, right? So, and we have 3 pauses, which are breaks during the day, 15-minute breaks. Like the worst thing that I did when I was when I had the worst burnout, was on Tuesdays, I had 13 meetings and 9 back-to-backs from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Right. I didn't have even like enough time to even go to the bathroom. So I was burnt out completely, like my brain was fried. And then the other one is pretty much, you have to take vacations. So there's a reason why we always say a 2-week vacation, because your brain needs to decompress. It's not enough if you're in the US to have a 3-day weekend. That's completely not enough. You need to like turn off your phone, turn off everything, and just decompress. And the last one, which is the most important one, is sleep, right? We need 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. And that's pretty much non-negotiable. Otherwise, we're going to have a degenerative effect on our brain. So a long answer, but this is pretty much the way I kind of see when my burnout happened. The last one, I saw that my relationships were going away with my clients and stuff like that. And then the cascading effect was I wasn't sleeping enough, and then me not doing novelty and all of that. And when I found that out, was like I just cut it off, and I was like, nope, I'm not doing it. I am just gonna go and pretty much be more in tune with myself. And I didn't get burnout after that. So this is the easiest acronym that I was able to see, like the 6 element of peace. Go and check them out. If you have more, if you have one that's not good, that's fine. But as soon as you get 2, it's going to be a cascading effect, and sooner or later you're just going to find yourself not being able to get out of bed. So, yeah.